Welcome back to the Classical Architecture Workshop. My name is Professor Brandon Rowe, and this is a follow-up to the previous video. Here we're going to continue our discussion and drawing tutorials of the Doric order. This time we're going to focus on specifically how to draw the column capital. So as our basic text to guide us through these efforts, we are using William Ware's The American Vignola. And the Doric order is one of the 5 classical orders. Here, once again, are the plates that we'll be using to guide us in these efforts. One thing to note, however, is that we will not be drawing all of the fluting on this Doric column capital in this video for time's sake. I would direct your attention to the book if you would like to follow that in more detail. With that, here is the sneak peek at the drawing that we're going to create. So in the last video, we went ahead and created the Doric column base. And now we're going to create the top half of this, the Doric column capital. As we get started with this next tutorial, just as before, you're going to need some of the same instruments. You're going to need a triangle, a 45 triangle, writing utensil, architectural scale, probably a rolling ruler. I also usually like this to use this builder's square as well, just to get a couple right angled type drawings. Anyways, we are going to continue with our drawing that we created earlier. As you recall, we drew the Doric base molding for a column. Now we're going to spend our time and attention on focusing on the upper half, which we call the column capital. So let's get started. One of the first things we're going to do here is we're going to add a top line here, which is going to be the very top of our drawing. So if I use my builder's square or triangle for this, let's line things up. Add a line across the top there. That's going to serve as that portion. You may recall that before we didn't really add a whole lot of information up here or detail regarding our graphic scale. But just as we did with earlier, right, with our block order, the base is 1/2 D. And the column capital is also 1/2 D in height. So we're going to go ahead and mark D, and to do that, the scale of the drawing we are creating is 3 inches equals 1 foot. So I'm going to go ahead and mark a tick mark here, and that is going to be our D on the upper portion here. And then what we're going to do now is we originally had this whole thing set up to be roughly 7.5 inches. So if we were to take right in the middle here, going from the top, 3 3/4 of an inch, we're going to just make a little tick mark there. And the reason I do that is we're going to create a break line in between this top drawing and the bottom drawing. So I'm going to use my rolling ruler here, grab, get this straight on the top. Oops. That's straight. For whatever reason, it's get crooked on me. Pull that down to that break line area. I'm going to stop right there at the center line, lift up my pencil, and then continue my line across. The reason I stopped is so I can create this break line. All right. So any of that line, the original width of the column that we created that is above that break line, we can go ahead and erase that now at this point. All right, we got that set up. Now the next thing we're going to do is, just as we did on this lower portion of the drawing, we're going to split D in half with another graphic scale. And so to do that, we're going to get our rolling ruler to strike a couple lines here. Make sure this is straight. And while we're at it, we are also going to add another graphic scale. So I'm going to use this one down here on the bottom as a guide. And this is going, once we cut this in half, it's only going to remain in this upper half. We're going to subdivide that into 3. So there we go. We've got that set up. Okay. So, to subdivide this, as you may recall, we use our 3-inch scale here. I'm just going to place a tick mark here at the middle, at the 6. I can continue that line through, and we'll just, since that's in 2 divisions, we'll label that with a 2. This next one we're going to create is in 3 divisions. So we're going to put a 3 there. You could keep using your, with this next one, to subdivide it, we're going to use our 1/2-inch scale. So if I place my 1/2-inch here, because D is 3, 2 is 1.5 inches, and then 3 would be 1/2 inch each division. So go ahead and mark those on here. Great. And these are going to help us get a couple of these major lines ready. Specifically, when we're looking at the column capital for the Doric order, it's broken down into a number of things. First, we've got at the top the abacus, underneath that the echinus, then we have the necking, and then towards the bottom, before the fluting starts, we have the astragal. And that composes the entire column capital. All right. So from there, we are going to go ahead and create another graphic scale. So on this next one, we just subdivided that into 3. We're going to subdivide each of those 3 parts into 3 smaller parts to make 9 total. And then one of those, we will also create another one right next to it, below that. And so that general proportion is 1/16 D. So we've already gone ahead and figured this out, but if you were to use your 1/2-inch scale here, that will enable us to make those divisions. So let's go ahead and make a graphic scale. Let's use our rolling ruler here to create another graphic scale right here. And once again, I'm using this as my guide down below. And we are calling this 9 subdivisions. So if I use my 1/2 inch scale, and actually before we do that, it might be helpful to actually bring some of those 3 lines across. So let's go ahead and do that. Pull this down. Go to that next one. Here, this bottom one. Okay, now let's use our 1/2 inch scale. So if we're subdividing this and we're using our 1/2 inch scale, what we're going to be able to do is because this is divided into 12, as if there's 12 inches. So every 4 major tick marks, or every 4 inches, we would add a line. You could also eyeball it at this point to do 3 subdivisions, but I wouldn't at this point. Reason being is there's a couple of these that we need to then subdivide again into thirds. Alright, and just as we said, we're going to add 1 additional one, so 9 plus the 1 to be 10 total down below there. And that's going to actually serve as our abacus. Alright, so with that, we are ready to pull some major lines. We'll get some of these other ones in just a moment, but this will enable us to get a lot of the major lines that we're trying to achieve here. So the first one that we're going to pull down, if we're looking at this, on the top of the, comprising as part of the abacus, we have a Cyma reversa molding. And so with that first division in the 9, we're going to strike a line across. That will be the bottom of the Cyma reversa. Then we're going to go down another 2, strike another line, go down another 2, strike a line for the echinus, go down 1, strike a line. That will be one of our fillets. And then from there we'll go down 3, strike a line, go down that last one, and then strike a line. So let's go ahead and do that. So like I said, this first one, and I'm going to use the rolling ruler for this. Be a little faster here. So we're going to go down 1, strike a line across, go down now 2, strike a line for the top of our echinus. Just make sure we're straight. Then we're going to go down another 2. I'm just going to check this. Sometimes if you get a little off, it can go a long ways, and we want to just make sure we're straight. Yep, see, we're a little off there. If you're drafting this on a flat piece of paper, it works a little bit better than in a sketchbook sometimes. Especially if you're using a spiral bound sketchbook. It's not always easy to use the rolling ruler. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so now from this one, we're going to go down another 2. I'm just going to keep using my triangle here. Lining it up on the left-hand side. So this part here, we are calling this this upper part the abacus. Right below that, these 2 lines that we just created, this is called the echinus. Below this, we call this the necking. And then we'll get to the astragal in just a moment. So the necking portion, it's that full 3, if we're looking at that. And so right above that, when we just created that space for the abacus, we're going to create another line if we go 1 down. Now we're going to go down the full 3. And then this last one that we just created, that 10th little module. Oops, finger got in the way. All right. So this last part right below the necking here, this is called the astragal. That gives us a couple of our major lines for our moldings. Now, before we go any further, what we need to do is we need to get the diameter of the upper part of the column there. As you recall, when we're doing the block order, the column, once it gets 1/3 of the way up, it starts to taper the rest of the way. We call that entasis. And so that portion here is 5/6D. So just as we did before, we're going to create a graphic scale here to be able to get the 5/6Ds, and as well as this upper portion that we originally just kind of blocked out, that is going to be our 7/6D. So just as we did on the bottom, we did an 8/6D. And when we divide D, or 3 inches, into 6 parts, that gives us a 1/2 inch each one. So to do that, we're going to use our 1/2 inch scale. And before we do that, we'll actually draft here really quickly space for a little graphic scale up above. I'm going to go up just 1/8 of an inch to create that graphic scale there for us. Alright, so like I said, you're going to use your 1/2 inch scale here. And for this first part, what we're going to do actually is we're going to place the part of the 1/2 inch scale with all the little tick marks there. We're going to center it on that center line right in the middle, and we're going to place a line on either side, on the 0 and the other, because when we have an odd number, we have to center it on the center line. From there now, we're going to go ahead and be able to add 3, still using our 1/2 inch scale here. Line this up so at the center point it's in between the 3 and the 4. That's on our tick marks. We're going to add one at the 0, the 1, 2, we've got the 3 and the 4, 5, 6, and 7. We can erase any of that excess that we've got. Okay. Now with this, we're going to go ahead and use our rolling ruler. I'm going to pull this down until we get to one of those sides. I'm just going to strike a line that goes down just a little ways. That is going to be that fascia portion of the abacus. I'm also going to take a line on the next one over. I'm going to dash this line though through most of the molding past the echinus until it gets to the necking portion. I'm going to make a solid line. Below the astragal, I will keep that solid as well, going all the way down to that break line that we created earlier. So it'll look something like that. We'll do the same thing on the other side. So 2.5 spaces from the center line. We'll do a dashed line first. Solid line for the necking portion, as well as below the astragal for the column. So that enables us to see really quickly, you know, the thickness, the difference in diameter from the base to the top. And then the one that I still need to add here is that one on the 7th marking. We'll just go down just a little ways there for that upper portion of the abacus. Oops. It should actually extend down to that other line. There we go. All right. So with that, now what we're going to do is we've already got some of these things labeled here on the side, but this line here right above the abacus, I'm just going to continue this dash through here and strike that line, because this portion, if you take it all the way across, it goes back to our half D. And this is our capital. Which is 1/2 D. I also want to label this portion, so the length of the shaft in between, that is 7D. Seven diameters in height. We're breaking it because we're not showing that full column. All right. So from there, we've got a lot of the information that we need. So what we're going to do now is, first here at the top, when we get to this location here, we're going to use our 45-degree triangle to give us some information. So this intersection, and I should label this, this was the 7/6D, and this is our center line. So this intersection at the top of the echinus here, where we created that dashed line, we're going to create a dashed 45-degree diagonal line. to the top. And that will line up here, but that just gives you that geometry. And what we'll do from there is if we create another diagonal line off of that, going the opposite way, and where that hits that line that we just created, we're going to go vertical with that. And that actually will be the top of the fillet above the cyma reversa. We'll do that on both sides. Okay. All right. So this area here, this is an important part of the molding. Same here. We'll just thicken those up just a little bit. So the next area where we are going to go vertical with this is right above, where we went down for the full 9, right here at this point. We're going to take a diagonal line at a 45. That will give us this point here, but it'll also help us with a couple other things. So we place that right there at that corner. Take our diagonal up. I should have dashed that. That's okay. All right. So from there, there's a couple other things that we need to be aware of. So as you recall, as we're creating this, and I'm going to add a little dimension stringer here, just to remind ourselves that this dimension is actually 1/16 D, and that we're going to use that same dimension to do an offset for the astragal, so from the face of the necking outward. So we did use our 1/2 inch scale here, and there's a couple of ways you can go about this. If you had dividers, you could use those as well, just to get that same dimension. I'll go ahead and do that, or you could use your compass. If I use that to get a measurement here, do that on both sides. And if I carry that line up, that will give me some other important information that I'll need in just a moment. All right. And we'll add a dimension stringer there, just to remind us that is 1/16 D, same as this. Okay, so now the fun part, where we need to subdivide some of these into thirds. So I'm going to use my rolling ruler to create another graphic scale. Just below this, we're going to subdivide this first one into 3. We're going to do this next one up here, kind of by the 9. And then we'll do the very top one. We'll go down 1/8 of an inch, create another vertical line. And then at this point, I would actually just eyeball this to divide it into 3 parts. because it doesn't really equate to a good number. So we'll add our 3 above each of these. All right, so from there we are going to create some horizontal lines. So the very top part of the abacus, that is going to just go down one little tick mark there with that new subdivision we just created. That will serve as that fillet portion. So right where we created that little box there earlier. And what we're going to do is we're going to create our abacus, our cyma reversa. And the easiest way to think about this is the cyma reversa is always a supporting molding. So it is supporting something that is pushing on it. So it starts to bulge out first and then do the reverse. So if we create that here, and then on the other side it will be the inverse. And if you recall from our molding exercise, the way to remember this is essentially 2 vertical circles, 2 circles stacked vertically on top of one another, and then from this point on there's a weight being applied, and so it's bulging out here at this point. And that is our cyma reversa. Okay, so we've got our little fillet there at the top. We've got our cyma reversa right below it. Now let's go ahead and jump down to this next portion. And what we're going to do here is going up from the bottom with the astragal. We've subdivided this. We're going to strike a line across on that first third little mark. Strike a line across. And this is going to be our fillet. And then the upper 2 is our actual top part of the abacus. So if we do here, just like we did with a bead molding or the torus, we've got a half round that is going to line up with these edges that we just created. And right at that half there, that is where we're going to go vertical down for the fillet. And then we will do another quarter round connecting to the column. Now we'll do the same on this other side. Half round, go straight down at that half mark, and then we will create a quarter round molding, conge molding, to transition to the column shaft itself. Do a dash in here to indicate that. And there's our abacus. So now as we go up one, at the bottom of the necking, where we subdivided that into thirds, that first one, we're going to use that to draft a line across. So I'll line this up with my side, create a line across there. Okay, and just as before, like we said, this line that we were continuing up, there was a purpose for that. Similar to down below, we're going to add a bead molding or a half round, and it's going to end at this line here. So we're going to go ahead and put that in. And once again, it's replicating this same molding. We'll have a flat fillet there, and then a quarter round conge. Same with this other side. And these areas are really small, and so that's why we're not using our compass per se. And another quarter round. Okay, so the nice thing now is that where this fillet is, if we were to dash a line up to this top of the echinus area here, now we can actually use our compass, place the center there, adjust your compass so that it actually comes and hits this area right here. And we are going to do a quarter round. I can get this to work correctly. Got it on that side. Oh, placed in the wrong spot. Excuse me. That's right, because we needed to go up from that fillet, that flat fillet molding, place our center there. And what you should have on either side is that abacus, that quarter round mold, should leave a little flat part between the fascia above. So if we do it right, there should be a little flat area right there. Okay. Well, other than that, that is the column capital for the Doric order. Just clean that up a little bit. I would go ahead and thicken up some of these lines where the moldings are, so you can see that full profile. Of the column capital. And there we go. I will add one more dimension stringer here just to remind ourselves that the thickness of the necking and this upper portion of the column is not a full D, it's only 5/6 D. If we go and look through this, I think that is it. That's everything. So thanks again for joining us on the Classical Architecture Workshop. Next class, we're going to move from the column itself to the beam right above it. We call this the entablature. So thanks for joining us.